Some criticisms, as you alluded to as speaker, which we sort of want to take in,
of course,
in turn. The first is you mentioned about wanting to be a referee rather than a participant. I think one of the criticisms is that a good referee and a football pitch, you don't notice that they're there; they're just letting the game go on. And I guess one of the criticisms is that you like the sound of your own whistle a bit too much, so to speak, in refereeing terms, and being the centre of attention. And what do you make of that criticism?
Do I like the sound of my own whistle too much? Yes. Did I speak too much? Yes. Should I have been more succinct? Yes. That criticism is a fair criticism. I've always been loquacious. I've always been on the prolix side. I inherited that from my father, who spoke in paragraphs. And my mother used to say to him, "Oh, Charles, you'll never use one word where 100 will do." And they used to have these little debates when she would say, "Oh, Charles, the point could be made more succinctly. You insist on developing it at great length." And he used to say, "Well, Brenda, you don't finish the point. You're so keen to rush on to something else that you don't actually finish the sentence, or you don't develop the argument fully, so to speak." So, they were polar opposites in that sense. He was rather long-winded, and she very often didn't tell the full story. Now, I, as you can tell, inherit far more of my father's traits in that respect than my mother's traits, and I've always been loquacious. So did I sometimes speak too much? I did. The only two caveats I'd insert, and it is a failing of mine, I don't think it meant that I was a bad speaker, and I think during a very high-octane time, the idea that the speaker wouldn't have to intervene quite a lot was not realistic. It was so humongously noisy, I had to do so. The only two caveats I would utter are these. First, I think some of the people, and I don't include you or Esther in this category, who say that are people who basically just didn't like me. And, it was added to the charge sheet. "Oh, he's this, he's that, and he talks too much," and so on. And they were just people who were hostile. And so it was just on the list of objections. And the other caveat is that even now, I meet people every single day going around London who come up to me, completely self-selecting. I'm not saying it's representing the country, self-selecting, because if people don't know you, they're not going to come up to you, or if people think you're a 24-carat tosser, they're probably not going to bother to come up and say so and pick an argument. They'll just go about their business and think, "Oh, God, there's that bloke Bercow, we didn't like him, pleased he's gone." But every day people come up to me and say, "Oh, we miss you in the chair, I respect what you did, I so enjoyed it." Only on Monday, when I was taking my daughter to a medical appointment, I was on a train and a woman came up to me and she said, "I really miss you in the chair, Mr. Bercow, and I loved your use of the English language." And that does happen a lot. So yes, I was long-winded and I shouldn't have been, and it probably got on people's nerves, and I should have intervened less and been more self-disciplined. I was worse when I was tired, because when I was really tired, I'd be more indisciplined. So that is a fair criticism, but I don't think it is, if I may say so, a slam dunk.
Would you say that you play to the gallery a bit too much? So let me give you an example. When it was mooted that President Trump might want to come and give an address to Parliament, you were asked about this when you were in the chair. It struck me that the Speaker might say, "Well, look, no formal request has been made. If a formal request is made, it'll be considered in the normal way." And that's what I would have expected a Speaker to say. But you didn't. You said that under no circumstances is this man going to be addressing Parliament without any reference to the Lord Speaker, which I think caused some irritation there as well. Would you consider that to be a failing, the sort of playing to the gallery accusation?
I think I sometimes did play to the gallery. I think I was sometimes guilty of being, if you like, almost entrapped in or consumed by the moment and probably revelling in the theatre of it. I don't myself think that that is a compelling example. I completely understand that point of view. That point of view was expressed to me by a number of people. You're not alone, including other friends of mine. I know Julian Lewis thought that I was wrong about that. I remember John Redwood came to see me and he said, "John, I think you mishandled that." My attitude, Philip, at the time was that I knew from correspondence behind the scenes that the government was very seriously entertaining the idea. The government wanted to invite President Trump to address Parliament. Julian at one point sort of saying to me it wasn't going to happen was just quite wrong. I said, "Well, sorry, Julian, but I know what was going on behind the scenes, and it was going to happen." And the fact is, I was irritated, maybe more irritated than I should have been, but I was irritated by reading what were obviously briefed articles in the newspapers at the time. Don't ask me now to quote every example because I couldn't, but there were articles in the newspapers at the time suggesting that the government was proceeding apace and planning to make that happen. And therefore, to be honest, I wanted to nip it in the bud. My sense was, rightly or wrongly, that most colleagues would prefer him not to come, and I thought there were compelling reasons why he shouldn't. The Lord Speaker at the time was sitting gloriously on the fence, in some danger of puncturing himself in a sensitive place, and I thought it better to have an opinion and express it. But did it drive people crackers on the Conservative benches? It did. If you're asking me, do I regret it? I don't, but I do think it was a mistake on my part. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't intended to be troublemaking, it was a surplus of candour. It was a mistake on my part to say to somebody at Reading, I think it was, in answer to questions after a lecture, that I had voted to remain in the referendum. I think it would have been better if I hadn't said that. Now, quite a lot of people probably thought, well, John voted remain, but I didn't need to say that, and it would have been wiser not to do so. So I'm trying to be completely candid with you. I did make mistakes. I don't personally regret what I said about Trump. I think it would have been better if I hadn't said what I did about voting Remain, especially in view of the way matters subsequently developed.
Which we'll come on to.
I'm sure.